Hi everyone, you're all welcome to this webinar on the topic of migrating VMware estates to the cloud, brought to you this morning by DNA IT and IBM. My name is Adrian Kelly, I'm the Sales and Marketing Director of DNA IT Solutions, and I'm joined today by JD Wells, who is the Worldwide Sales Leader for VMware Solutions in the IBM Cloud. And I'm also joined this morning by Noel Crawford, who is the IBM Cloud Sales Leader in Ireland. So as we go throughout the session, guys, if you have any questions, please use the questions function to submit them to us. We've received a couple of questions in advance of the session already, but we'll answer those at the end of the session in a Q&A, and we've left plenty of time in the schedule for that. But to kick off, I want to give you a quick bit of context with regard to DNA IT and who we are, and basically to make a bit of context for where do we fit in with all of this. So very quickly, I guess, we're talking about VMware, we're talking about IBM, we're talking about cloud migration. So for a lot of people not sure where exactly a company like DNA IT fits in. So this isn't a pitch, but it's just to give a bit of a, I guess, context and explanation for how this whole system is engineered to work. So we are what we would describe as a cloud-centric managed services provider. And we adopt very much a security by design approach. It's all driven along the lines of quality and service standards, whether it's ISO or 27001 or 9001. We're very much driven to those kind of standards, and we operate to those levels. But above all, we would believe very strongly in a company culture that it's about everybody cares to get the job done right. And it's a real ethos commitment in the business to I suppose what we would consider, the customer relationship. Look, yeah, it's a values-based business. It's all about getting things done the right way. We have an ethos that very much puts an emphasis on quality of service and a partnership mindset. And we are backed by some of the best vendors in the market, including IBM. So the way we operate is in a very simple sort of a mindset that really it's about, discover, engage, deliver is how we break it down. And as you can imagine, it's a very logical, simple idea that you're reviewing where people are in their current operations in relation to business. We develop a project plan for seamless delivery that gives value, and we implement your plan and enable a customer support model. It's all about identifying the right products and tooling, services that you're going to get along your cloud journey. As we find with a lot of customers, regardless of size, in a smaller company to a large company, a lot of the same issues, the very same. The only issue is the scale may be different, but it's still very much a critical project, and there's a lot of nervousness along the way as people are particularly taking their first steps into cloud when it comes to production environments and things like that. So we have, I guess, kind of boiled it down to, does this sound like you? A lot of people looking at cloud, where do they go next? We kind of find a lot of people are in these categories. If you're experiencing growth in your existing infrastructure, but you're not really able to, I guess, plan where do you want to go next, you're not able to cope, you're not sure where you're going to go. You can buy the new version of everything and stay on the existing hardware-centric model, or do we look at cloud? And that's really what we have done this so much with so many different organizations in the last few years. It's one of the reasons why we pulled this webinar together this morning. A lot of companies planning for future growth, particularly now the pandemic is receding, and looking at the existing IT resources are just not enough. Again, conversation comes in, well, is now a good time to go to cloud? A lot of people, like I've said, are in this place but are not sure of their options. There is a perception that it's all much of a muchness really between all the major cloud vendors, and it's hard to see what differentiates people, and it can be a bit confusing, to be honest. Again, our role is to try and break that down for people and really walk you through what each option means in reality. And you do need an expert team to look after you in terms of this. Even if you have your own IT team, they're probably very busy covering a lot of different things. And so it's always important to bring in experts who are doing this day in, day out. And like I said, we need, it's access to a certain skill set for a particular one-off project, and the transition of getting into the cloud, it is a big undertaking. This is just again to reiterate the point in terms of DNA and our experience. We're very much cloud-centric. We were recognized for that a few years ago in the Tech Excellence Awards before the pandemic. Our work in the cloud space and delivering cloud projects has received a lot of recognition. We have a sample of customers across a very broad base, as is typical in Ireland, from financial services right the way through to manufacturing environments, multinational corporations and not-for-profits. A very broad base. Many of the people you see on this screen run all or part of their environment out of the IBM Cloud, or use many different services in the IBM Cloud, from production to disaster recovery and a lot more, and even test and dev, you name it. It's a very broad mix. Companies like DNA are the go-to-market model now for IBM globally with regard to their cloud platform. And that's very good for customers, because it means we're able to really deliver a product and a service that's very much customized to what each individual customer is trying to do. So for example, one of the things that we can do in the IBM Cloud is to offer people a fixed monthly cost for running compute, running production systems in the cloud. And we simply can't do that with any other vendor. Now, there's a lot of reasons why it's engineered a little bit differently that allows us to do some of these things, and we won't be going into every gritty detail this morning, but for further discussion, but just to try and pass it, I suppose, and give you a quick overview of it. There's a lot of stuff we really like. The single pane of glass governance, the option of strong bare metal solution, which is extremely powerful and unique to IBM. And then finally, I suppose, just to recap on where do we fit in what we bring to the table, like global strategy now to go to market using partners like DNA. And we are becoming subject matter experts on the IBM platform, and it's a very big place. It represents quite a lot, over 300 different products and services now. We have become a leading partner in the Irish market. IBM have selected us for that based on our experience of delivering these solutions in the real world, and the fact that we've gone through such an extensive learning curve over the years doing these projects with customers. We've a lot of deep experience. We've made a, we've seen an awful lot of the mistakes that are made in the planning, particularly, and in the execution and the follow-on support. These things, how do you live with these things in the longer term? Live with a cloud solution? How is it supported? How is it developed? And so on over time. We are effectively like a central point of contact then in the longer term for coordination, both at a project level and in the long term for ongoing account management. So when it's all died down and the project is done and dusted and delivered, in the longer term, we're still your point of contact for everything got to do with the IBM portfolio. And this is the beautiful part about it, is that as your needs and develop and things go on over time, we're always able to put our hand on the right resources within IBM's vast portfolio of products and personnel to help you with whatever you're trying to do. And like I said, we're a managed services company first and foremost, so everything about how we operate is geared towards that long-term operational excellence model. It's not a focus of sort of deliver the project and walk away until the next project. It's very much designed around the long-term engagement and getting maximum value and support out of that. And as I touched on earlier, DNA and ourselves, we ourselves have a vast partner ecosystem that we're working with between third parties and other companies, contractors, and IBM. So together we represent an enormous pool of resources, of skills between ourselves and IBM and our partner ecosystems. There's no skill that we can't bring to the market, and we have a vast portfolio of services there. So yeah, we always put it this way, it's about the journey, and it's a long-term thing. It's about looking at where you are today, what are your needs for tomorrow, and make a plan to get you there. And then I think I'm going to put another point beyond that, which is living with it after it's all been done till the next time. So guys, thanks very much. That's a quick overview of DNA, a bit of context for who we are and where we fit in. I'm going to hand you over now to JD Wells, who's going to give you the IBM portfolio around the VMware stuff in some depth. Like I said, JD is the worldwide sales leader for VMware within IBM. So JD, in your own time there.
Adrian, thank you so much. It was great having an opportunity to meet you guys back in 2020. Now that we're all starting to get a handle on COVID here, it would be fantastic to really meet you guys in person and your customers as well. So thanks so much for helping to set this up and inviting me to come tell you about VMware solutions on IBM Cloud. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and your customers. So as Adrian had mentioned, I'm JD Wells, Worldwide Sales Leader for VMware Solutions on IBM Cloud, in this position now for 3 years and working for IBM now for 8. Over that time, I've held a number of different roles in IBM, coming from more of an architect, tech sales background, and then in the last 3 years focused on our VMware solutions, specifically on IBM Cloud for VMware. Today, I'd like to talk to you about a little bit about what's happening in the market, what the cloud journey has looked like for our customers and our partners, and then an overview of the portfolio. We'll then get into the use cases of migrate and modernize into data protection onto regulated workloads, and then we'll close out on desktops as a service. And then we'll also have some time for questions and a really compelling offer at the end. A couple of really interesting stats here. It's a top priority for executives to modernize their workloads and their legacy applications. But what's even more kind of prevalent is global organizations have been adopting cloud. Some of them have dipped a toe. They've brought the easy stuff. Maybe they've got multiple clouds and they've got multiple environments. Many customers that we're working with are running on-premise, on cloud, on edge. And with that, it's brought new capabilities and new promise, but it has also brought new complexities. The number of environments that our customers and partners are having to manage has really multiplied, and with that, new challenges have arisen. But along with that, companies really want to adopt cloud because of the power, the efficiency, and the flexibility that it brings, but it doesn't always necessarily apply equally to their legacy applications. Some companies have had challenges bringing legacy and heritage apps onto the cloud, and although there's been great adoption of cloud and multiple types of cloud, it is now a top priority to actually update those legacy applications, and how that's done alongside existing applications is a top priority for executives. So to help to drive that, really what is necessary is a solid foundation to have an environment that's going to give customers and partners the flexibility to do that without introducing risk and challenge. And what we've been helping customers do is to bring those capabilities onto cloud. Because IBM offers the widest capability of VMware on cloud, it makes it very simple for customers to take that existing landscape and simply shift it over onto our platform. That same type of capability is also available for Power and many other unique IBM technologies, but giving customers the widest selection of compute platforms and the most access to those environments makes it very easy to lift and shift and then be able to modernize that environment, to evolve it, to transform it, and bring innovation into the business. Now, this is very important for many customers and our partners that are running VMware solutions today. This allows companies and partners to effectively take that existing skill set and simply shift it onto cloud, giving them the ability to then modernize along with their business strategy, not necessarily being forced to update things, but being able to pick where it makes the most amount of sense and then get the maximum ROI from those workloads, keeping things running if they're bringing value, and then modernizing the components that are going to bring the most value immediately without being forced to refactor, replatform, or redevelop. This also pairs well with existing business needs. Those teams familiar with those capabilities can simply take that skill set onto cloud, and now they're able to benefit from elastic demand. They can scale up and scale down very simply through a click of a button or an API. And then with that, they're able to maximize the ROI of those existing systems without really bringing disruption. We've been doing many assessments of customer workloads as they move to cloud, analyzing what's in it, and we often do see many old operating systems that wouldn't be candidates to move to cloud. They're doing things of value, but being able to bring that full landscape over has really accelerated the adoption of cloud and has minimized impact, or has had no impact for workloads as they're continuing to operate, and then in time, they can thoughtfully and constructively update those systems. Now, lots of benefits that can be brought by bringing these capabilities onto the IBM Cloud platform, but also there is a big need to actually update those environments by October of 2022 this year. vSphere 6 and NSXV, which is the virtual network component of a vSphere environment, are both end of life and end of support. For customers that may have a premier relationship with VMware, vSphere 6 has been extended until October, but for many customers that may not have the premier support relationship that IBM benefits from, those environments may have just recently exceeded their support window. This is becoming increasingly important, especially in today's cyber landscape, that you have a supported and secure platform to make sure that you have access to proper patches and systems are properly secured so that operations are not impacted unexpectedly, and you can make sure that the latest, the greatest, and the most secure solutions are out there running. With that, customers and partners are able to really rapidly solve for these challenges. You can simply move directly onto vSphere 7, onto IBM Cloud, and for NSX, we offer NSX-T, or optionally, customers can go purely vSphere if they're not using the NSX VPC component. What this is really going to help is to immediately satisfy the need to update those systems without having to rip and replace. You're simply able to just drop them onto vSphere 6 and NSX-T, and then all of the benefits that come along with it will immediately be rendered by moving that environment onto IBM Cloud for VMware. Now, why IBM Cloud, I think, is also an important thing to talk about, and we'll talk more about the VMware solutions, but I think there are some really unique differentiations within IBM Cloud that really play strongly to the VMware solutions we offer as well. And IBM Cloud is built on three main tenets of open innovation, security leadership, and enterprise grade. In regards to open innovation, IBM has been a big contributor to open source technologies for many years. And recently, we did acquire Red Hat, the largest open source company in the market. It's no mystery that IBM is a huge contributor and investor in open source technologies, and that concept of open has also been applied to the way that we bring VMware to IBM Cloud. We provide full open access to VMware and IBM Cloud for our customers and our partners with no restrictions to the access of the vSphere or the vCenter APIs. The same level of access control is available for VMware on-premise as it is on IBM Cloud. And what that means is your existing tools, processes, and licensing can be brought directly over as is. VMware is a very wide ecosystem of solutions. There's many different tools that are helping customers to deploy, protect, secure, and scale. And those same tools can be simply pointed at IBM Cloud for VMware, and you're able to leverage that. So those same operations can essentially just move on to IBM Cloud for VMware, making it very simple for our customers and our partners to adopt, and also removing the hesitation that they may not be able to use certain tools or may not have certain access that they're accustomed to, and then also reducing the concern that they may have to repurchase. All of those things are not concerns on IBM Cloud for VMware because of that open access. Open access is also very critical for security. Being able to configure your ciphers and your encryption to your exacting specification is only an option when you have that open access to that environment. For both vSAN or NFS storage, customers have full control over how those environments are attached from a storage, and then how they're set up from a security standpoint. And then also with IBM Cloud offering the highest level of security in the cloud, which is FIPS 140-2 level 4. No other public cloud provider offers that level 4 keep your own key security capability. That is also available within our VMware solutions because of that open and full security access within the platform. There's many other capabilities that are key for that open access and security when it comes to NSX for your networking, and the vSAN or the storage components, and these security components are all there for customers to benefit on top of that open access. Now, for enterprise grade, IBM is a company of over 100 years, and we've been working with large enterprises throughout that history. The solution on IBM Cloud for VMware is now deployed by over 2,000 customers and has been adopted by many large generally Fortune 1000 companies leveraging this technology on IBM Cloud. The history with VMware goes back over 20 years at this point, and the VMware on IBM Cloud solution goes back to 2015. It was the first public cloud environment that offered VMware on cloud, and since then there has been a lot of evolution and innovation brought into the product, and it's a very mature and widely adopted platform by many of our customers today. It's built with the enterprise in mind. These core tenets of open and security leadership is really what resonates with our enterprise customers, and the broader public is here able to benefit from it by all of these innovations that have been built into the solution over all of the years that the product has been on IBM Cloud, and many of the solutions that we've built with VMware over the years. Now, hopefully you can kind of understand how IBM Cloud is an ideal solution for a VMware product, but I'd like to tell you more about specifically the IBM VMware catalog. IBM Cloud for VMware is really two main infrastructure components that make up our core capabilities and bring the portfolio solutions to our customers. IBM Cloud for VMware Dedicated and IBM Cloud for VMware Shared are the two infrastructure pieces that all of these other capabilities stand on top of. IBM Cloud for VMware Dedicated is very simply a suite of different vSphere solutions, from standard infrastructure nodes to a fully automated deployed software-defined data center on top of that vSphere infrastructure. And IBM Cloud for VMware Shared is built on top of the VMware vCloud Director service. It is a cloud native environment where essentially the customer and the partner is effectively deploying VMware VMs through a simple API or a portal. So all of the things that you would need to run a VMware environment, running your vCenter console, making sure the clusters are properly configured, you have clustering and anti-affinity and fault tolerance all built into that solution. But at the end of it, the customer or the partner simply only needs to choose how much capacity they need, and then IBM is handling all of that for them. So it really is a cloud native VMware solution, and it's a main infrastructure option that makes many of these capabilities available. On top of this platform, we've brought together a number of different solutions around cloud migration. And then for FS Cloud and regulated workloads, our dedicated platform has been built on top of a number of solutions that are enabling customers to meet the highest level of security and compliance on the cloud on top of that dedicated platform. Where shared comes in along with dedicated is it also makes new use cases available, like DR. In environments that you're doing disaster recovery, hopefully that environment is not needed until a disaster actually strikes. By leveraging the IBM Cloud for VMware Shared solution, customers are able to replicate data, and then through a number of different protocols like Veeam and Zerto, or using Terraform and Ansible, that DR environment can effectively be turned off. And only the storage that the customer and the partner is consuming is actually what is the main cost component. And in the event of a disaster, you can simply power that environment up, pay for the utilization that you consume, and then power it down. These new types of capabilities built on this cloud native platform make disaster recovery very cost effective. And new use cases like this would not be available to customers that are running on premise, where they have to make that capital expenditure to have that hardware there and available and mostly idled for these DR use cases. Cloud now makes new use cases around DR very cost effective and very elastic and very quick to recover on top of these new cloud native like platforms. We'll talk a lot more about disaster recovery later on in the presentation, but I'd like to talk a little bit more about OpenShift and Kubernetes and what that means for our service portfolio. OpenShift is actually more widely deployed on VMware than any other place today. By being able to deploy OpenShift inside of IBM Cloud for VMware, both our dedicated and our shared environments, makes it very easy to start to adopt OpenShift and container services on top of your existing VMware environments. Not only does IBM Cloud offer the ability to deploy OpenShift directly inside of your VMware environment, be it dedicated or shared. But IBM Cloud also offers a fully managed OpenShift environment and a fully managed IBM Kubernetes service as well. By leveraging these technologies and having the option to deploy directly inside of your dedicated or shared environment gives customers the widest selection of options on how they can modernize those workloads. There are some really key security scenarios that can greatly benefit by deploying OpenShift directly inside of your VMware landscape, but also for customers that may have more of an aggregated deployment, you can deploy it directly alongside your existing VMware environment, making it very simple to essentially bolt on fully managed capabilities that can then benefit and help to modernize and innovate existing workloads. So it's very, very powerful having a set of both dedicated and multi-tenant or shared solutions, and how you can pair them together and where they come together is really opening up new use cases and capabilities for our customers and our partners, and we're having great success on top of these infrastructure components. Within that portfolio of the dedicated and the shared environment, there are a number of different products that I'd like to walk you through. Within the dedicated platform, there are three main infrastructure options. What most customers are deploying today on IBM Cloud for VMware is what we call our VCS solution, or the VMware vCenter service. It's a fully automated software-defined data center platform that has the industry's largest selection of different hardware, RAM, and storage options. Inside of this solution, you're able to fully deploy a vCenter cluster through a simple click of a button after you've made some hardware configurations and chose your regions and configs. And then it will deploy that environment with automated vCenter configuration, including NSX, a number of different options of NSX starting at base, working up, and then also vSAN or NFS or direct attached storage. The base deployment of the management environment can be deployed separate from your workload, and customers are able to very simply actually change the size of that environment, change the shape of the deployment, and then scale up workload independently of different clusters themselves. This is ideal for large VMware workloads where you'll be deploying 3 or more hosts within a cluster, and it makes it very simple to elastically scale up and scale down based on the compute that's needed for the workload itself that may be cyclical or perhaps maintenances as well. Now, how this solution came to be was back in 2014, early 2015, we initially first launched VMware verified certified infrastructure nodes. That is what we call our VMware vSphere ESXi, and it gives customers a very wide selection of many different individual hardware nodes that can be provisioned. For customers that may not be deploying a full VMware cluster, but may be using VMware for specific parts of the workload, this is a very popular option for those customers. There are a lot of VoIP appliances and security appliances that will run on top of VMware, and we'll have a large customer base that will have a VMware node that will help to facilitate different parts of that workload. Also, some customers do prefer to build their VMware vCenter environment. They like to have that full control over how they configure it and how it works within that cluster, and that is also a popular method for those customers as well that may have the preference of building their own clusters. And now, on top of that infrastructure platform, just as of a few weeks ago, we now offer vSphere nodes in our VPC infrastructure as well. This brings the ability to provision nodes within 10 minutes, and then it has an hourly billing model, which the other two options I just talked about were both monthly. This new type of capability, being able to rapidly provision within minutes and then billing on the hour, enables new use cases where you may need to very elastically add capacity or remove capacity on an hourly basis. We're working with VMware to actually automate the deployment of vCloud foundations and have made this technology available to our customers along with our APIs. So for customers that are running vCloud Foundations, which is a very popular solution on premise, they're able to now take advantage of the VPC infrastructure on IBM Cloud and deploy vCloud Foundations directly on top of it. Notably, this solution also has high network throughputs of 100 gigabits per second. So if there are workloads that have high network utilization, are very elastic, and need to be deployed within minutes, the VPC catalog is now bringing these new types of capabilities to IBM Cloud for VMware. And the last one I'm talking about here is IBM Cloud for VMware Shared. It's a fully managed VMware environment. Customers simply choose the amount of vCPU or VRAM that they want to deploy, and then everything else is handled for them. Behind the scenes, there is some 25 gig network fabric that's all making that all possible. But as a customer, you're simply just provisioning your virtual machines based on the resources that are necessary. And within that vCloud Director platform, there's a very simple and easy to use web-based console to manage the environment. It also has a very extensive API, making it simple to leverage tools like Ansible and Terraform to rapidly provision onto cloud or destroy. Things around dev, test, DR are very well suited for this type of solution, and it makes it simple to actually tie in with automation if you need to rapidly deploy, configure, and perhaps destroy those environments. On top of these main infrastructure components, we have brought new capabilities to market, and specifically within the dedicated catalog, we've taken these base infrastructure solutions along with additional technologies and have brought to market IBM Cloud for VMware Regulated Workloads, which is part of the IBM FS Cloud. Inside of this solution, a number of different technologies are brought together in a full reference architecture and design, ensuring that the security, the storage, the networking, the logging, and the compliance are all brought together cohesively into a solution that's designed for workloads that have requirements around regulation or financial services. Inside of this environment, it's actually deploying a number of key components alongside IBM Cloud, such as our Security and Compliance Center, and another tool that I should call out called Cavionics, that do continuous monitoring of the operation of that workload. With Cavionics and the solution of IBM Cloud for VMware tightly integrated, the requirements for financial service institutions, banking, insurance, healthcare, those requirements are built into the solution. Cavionics has full awareness of the operation of that environment with the integrations of the logging of that VMware landscape and the security controls that are necessary to adhere to those regulations. Should the environment change, perhaps a VM is placed into a different network segment, or there is additional capacity that's added to that environment, the environment is constantly monitoring what's operating. If there are changes or there are new components brought to the workload, it's able to identify that in real time and report on the compliance stature of that environment, ensuring that security is properly implemented and enforced, and the right segments and encryption for both the network and the storage are all properly in place. Should a customer or partner drift outside of those specifications, it's being monitored in real time to point that out and also give guidance on what may need to be done to get that environment back into compliance. This is a very big capability for our customers and partners that are having to operate these environments, be prepared for compliance readiness, and be able to have the data to attest that they're actually operating within those guidelines. This now makes it very simple to deploy a fully reference architecture design within the matter of hours, and then immediately, once activated, to have this full insight and then being able to take advantage of the security, the capability, and the compliance that can all be brought together when tying all of these solutions together. Now, in addition to that, We did talk a little bit earlier about OpenShift, but I think this really helps to kind of bring the whole picture together, especially with how other Red Hat technologies can benefit a VMware environment. Within both the dedicated and the shared infrastructure, these technologies can be all tied together to automate your deployment onto cloud, to automate how you're implementing your security, and how your existing virtual machines and containers may actually communicate and how they're secured. On top of the infrastructure which facilitates the workloads operation, Red Hat OpenShift is the containerization platform that will run inside of the dedicated or shared solution. Customers could also deploy their own Kubernetes should they choose to do so, and deploy these things alongside as well. But once the foundation has been laid, both from an infrastructure and a foundation standpoint, there are many benefits that come along with it. With OpenShift and being able to have orchestration of your containerization environment, IBM Cloud for VMware is there to support it, not only from the infrastructure requirements, but also from the scale, automation, and security. With NSX and OpenShift, you're able to have exacting control over that network envelope for both the virtual machines and the containers that are operating inside of it. NSXT, the virtual network component of VMware vSphere, will give you exacting control over how your network segments are created, where your virtual machines are placed, and where the containers are placed. And communication between those environments can be controlled not only at the vSphere environment, but also NSX can control that for both the virtual machines and the containers. This gives exacting control over the operation and the communications of the virtual machines and the containers. And also, it can be a huge net benefit on reducing latency, reducing bandwidth, and also being able to have a consistent view across that landscape. New challenges that had arisen around the vulnerability recently for Log4j can be completely mitigated in these types of designs. You would have full insight and operation over the communication of those environments, and it makes it very easy to understand if there are new risks, if there are new challenges, where may they be, and what action and control do you have to mitigate that. And reducing the latency can be very big for certain types of workloads. If you're running VoIP communications, they're very latency sensitive. Minimizing the hops and the communication across these environments greatly benefits these types of solutions, and you're uniquely able to do that in this type of environment. Another big thing is the cost to move data. If you're operating different services on different clouds, they often have different consumption models for those different types of services. By being able to put this full type of solution on top of IBM Cloud for VMware will actually negate the cost for additional bandwidth consumption. Being able to move it inside of those existing VMware environments on IBM Cloud, there's no bandwidth charge. So it's very cost effective as well to operate those environments. Red Hat Ansible is a very popular tool for the deployment of your applications and the configuration of your virtual machines, the applications and the configs that go on top of them. But Ansible goes much further than that. It is truly an end-to-end automation tool. With its ability to tie into cloud services, into infrastructure services, and into platform services, you can use Ansible to fully provision onto cloud. And all of the different infrastructure components, applications, and containers that may come after can be fully deployed, secured, and configured with Ansible. This applies to the deployment of infrastructure, the applications, how your networks are created, where the containers may reside and how they're configured, and then what is the security specification. By being able to leverage automation tools to deploy your environments gives you the profile to actually understand what was provisioned, what was the reason it was configured as such, and once it's deployed, has that configuration actually changed? This becomes a method of automation and also attestation to understand what you deployed, what is currently deployed and configured, and does it meet the specification? These types of techniques are actually being deployed by many IBM Cloud customers to adopt on cloud and to migrate onto cloud, and then be able to understand what is their position, and then how do they scale it, protect it, and continue to grow that environment. Now, there's a very wide set of solutions. Really, VMware has infinite possibility, if you will. But within the IBM Cloud for VMware catalog, we have a number of partner solutions in that portfolio. We're breaking them down here into security compliance, DR migration and backup, and storage solutions, and then platform modernization. Within these different tiers, you'll see that there are many probably familiar logos for these solutions. And you can look at this as, best practice recommendations by IBM Cloud. These solutions are really seen to be some of the top tier solutions within the VMware ecosystem, and we've brought them to market in partnership with these companies to help customers rapidly adopt cloud and be able to take advantage of top tier solutions in a very elastic and cloud-like model. We've integrated these products into the IBM Cloud for VMware solutions, making it very simple for customers to take advantage. Now, we feel that these are truly some of the best in breed solutions that are out there to take advantage of these use cases and scenarios, but there's no hard requirement to actually leverage these technologies for these use cases. There are some specifications that have to be adhered to within the regulated workload in FS Cloud, but outside of that, customers really do have full access and control of those environments to give them the control over what tools do they want to use. What tools are they using today, and how do they want to use those tools on IBM Cloud is there at their own discretion. So we really feel that these are some of the best solutions that are out there, and we make it easy to adopt and very simple to consume, but no hard requirement to leverage these technologies. It's also worth mentioning SAP. SAP does have very exacting specifications for their type of workloads, but in context of SAP on VMware, on IBM Cloud, IBM Cloud is the only provider that offers VMware SAP certified instances. There is no other provider in cloud that offers SAP certified VMware nodes. For workloads that are running SAP, be it HANA or NetWeaver, IBM Cloud has a number of different SAP certified instances that can satisfy those hardware requirements. Those nodes themselves can run standard x86 workloads. They don't have to run SAP. There are some really unique benefits that often follow SAP workloads, like very high terabyte RAM configurations and high core density in those systems are usually what large SAP workloads can benefit from. But for customers that may also have similar resource requirements, those SAP nodes can be well suited for them as well. And in the case of SAP, we're seeing a lot of customers that are really in the lift and shift scenario. They're simply taking that existing SAP landscape that may be running other databases today, lifting and shifting them onto IBM Cloud, and then preparing for the SAP HANA update, which I think is mandated in 2025. By being able to simply lift and shift existing landscapes, they can immediately take advantage of cloud. And then as time moves on and they get more prepared for the upgrade to SAP HANA and updating those NetWeaver components, they have a full selection of different hardware configurations that can satisfy that. And they can actually start out on those nodes if they choose to do so, and then deploy HANA or NetWeaver when they would like. There are many key differentiations within IBM Cloud. SAP definitely has a lot of highlights that we could talk about more, but to just kind of step back a little bit, since we're not explicitly talking about SAP, I'd like to just talk about some of the other key differentiators within IBM Cloud for VMware. We have brought a mission critical architecture to our solution that is available to customers that have very high SLA requirements. The vSAN technology has been incorporated within IBM Cloud for VMware, being able to deploy across multiple data centers within a zone. vSAN is effectively replicating in real time across high network connections behind the scenes on IBM Cloud. So if a full data center failure, or even if a full region was to fail with a network and the network pop and the data center, the data itself would be secured and replicated. It may not even have any noticeable downtime by deploying across 2 to 3 data centers within a single location. This is all possible because of that open and secure architecture that we provide, and there's additional benefits like vSphere encryption that are all encrypted into these types of solutions. That very secure infrastructure makes mission critical available. It also brings more secure solutions as well by being the only cloud provider that has a keep your own key model. That is part of that FIPS 140-2 level 4. That level 4 is effectively a keep your own key. And if there's any modification technically or physically to that environment, there is no way that IBM can actually recover those keys, and the customer has that assurance as part of the attestation in our security posture. On top of this, we have the largest catalog of solutions. If you go and look at some of the other VMware clouds, you'll see that they may have 1 or 2 different instances that you can choose from. Within IBM Cloud for VMware, there are at least 6 today different servers that you can pick, and within that server, you have very granular control over the different RAM configurations, usually 5 or 6 different RAM options per server. And then your storage can be vSAN, or it can also be NFS. And then in addition to the different CPU options, there are dual and quad proc systems offering many different core and RAM configurations. What this means to customers is not all workloads have the same resource requirement. And a workload today can very well evolve and change over time, and the resource requirement can adjust with it. What's challenging for some customers that are adopting other VMware clouds is because of the lack of options around the catalog, it can be a big challenge to find the right optimized configuration that's going to fit not only their performance, but their cost curve. All of the other competitors have very steep stairs along that cost curve. IBM Cloud for VMware has a very smooth option of different server configurations and shapes that can fit that cost curve very effectively, and also fit the performance curve as well, giving customers and partners the most option on different types of hardware configurations to optimize them for price and performance. And then earlier, we talked about our regulated workloads and SAP certified configurations, so won't really spend much more time there, but I think what is really unique is cost. We don't charge for the private network usage across our VMware solutions. So if you were to deploy in London today and Dallas, Texas tomorrow, those 2 environments on VMware and IBM Cloud are connected by default. There's no complicated VPN to deploy. There is no additional bandwidth charge to move data between those environments. If you're doing DR solutions, you can really ramp up your costs by doing that constant replication. So by providing a very wide collection of different servers and shapes and not metering customers for that private connectivity, along with giving customers the ability to bring their licensing over, really and truly does make IBM Cloud for VMware the most cost-effective platform for VMware on the cloud. We've been working with analysts and partners to help customers understand that, and what I'd like to talk a little bit about here is some analysis that we've been doing with a partner, Akaja Cloud, and some analyst reports that we've been working with Forrester on. A number of analysts will point to moving to cloud will bring about a 40% benefit of TCO. You'll see this sort of as a pattern from a number of different analysts, and we have done 2 studies now with Forrester. We did one originally in 2019, and then just concluded a refresh of that at the end of 2022 with Forrester and their total economic impact study. In those studies, they're seeing about an average of 40% reduction in cost of simply lifting and shifting those environments onto IBM Cloud for VMware. And over that time, we've also been doing analysis with Akaja Cloud Cost Planning. We've now completed over 200 projects with Akaja, and over that, we've actually observed a 30% average TCO savings for those environments when moving from premise to cloud. Akaja will help to provide a TCO analysis of existing workloads and then a hybrid cloud view across a number of different providers, making right-sized recommendations for different infrastructure based on the customer's workload. This was a very interesting observation, especially when you compare it to what the analysts were saying. It wasn't exactly 40%, but very close to it. All customer workloads will be different by default. The utilization, the age, all of those things play an impact into it. And perhaps the customers that we're working with are maybe a little ahead of the curve, so they're seeing a little bit reduced TCO, but this is becoming a very pronounced pattern that we're seeing. And now working with Akaja, we're able to actually quantify that in this analysis. What the chart is helping to illustrate is simply moving from premise to cloud. You'll be able to realize that TCO benefit of 37 to 40%, and then further benefits can be brought once that solution has been delivered onto IBM Cloud. By being able to collapse your development and your DR environment, effectively having DR on the ready but idled and using that capacity for development, there's additional cost savings that can also be brought. Plus, the ability to run environments on an hourly basis can bring additional cost benefits as well, and other things like cloud object storage for archiving data continue to bring more and more cost savings to these environments. In addition to some of the direct benefits that you can see from a TCO standpoint, there are also some really key built-in value components that we try to help quantify on this next chart. Like earlier I mentioned, we don't meter for the private network of VMware on IBM Cloud. That pays huge dividends. By default, the minimum size of a server that you'll deploy on IBM Cloud will come with at least 20 gigabits of network uplink for the private network and another 20 gigabits of uplink on the public. That's where we start. It goes up from there up to 100 plus. But to help quantify that, a 20 gigabit server running at 80% utilization for a month can generate 3 petabytes of traffic. 3 petabytes of traffic on all of the other clouds would cost at minimum 2 cents per gigabyte. 2 cents per gigabyte times 3 petabytes comes out to $60,000 in bandwidth consumptive charges. Now, not all customers are going to be pushing that amount of bandwidth, but I think it is very evident that what could be consumed if you're running these environments and you're getting a lot of utilization out of them. That's simply what can be generated by one server with 20 gigs of capability. If you take it higher and you multiply the number of systems, those costs can also multiply as well. Now, that private network is a huge benefit to our customers. It's simple to adopt. You simply just deploy in 2 different regions and you now have the benefit of it, and it's not going to cost you anything else. But in addition to that, we also provide 500 gigabits of public bandwidth with all of our bare metal instances for VMware, providing additional bandwidth for all of those nodes to help to reduce your operating cost. Also, uniquely, we're one of the few VMware clouds that provides full vSphere and vCenter API access. Most other providers do not. There's really just a couple that do, and this is very key for customers to adopt existing processes that they can simply bring on to IBM Cloud for VMware, and then it helps to substantially reduce risk and hesitation as to whether or not your existing tools, operations, and applications will be able to operate on another VMware environment. Huge collection of different hardware configs. We definitely talked about how the different price and performance curves can benefit from that. And then also with the ability of supporting these SAP workloads, we have the highest core and the highest RAM configs that are available in cloud. And that's where we are today, but you're actually going to see that increase substantially here as well as we continue to enhance our SAP workloads. A little bit more about the Forrester study. This is available for anyone that would like to take a link. We have the most recent Forrester Total Economic Impact Study available here down at the bottom of the screen. It's available for anybody that would like to go take a look. It'll tell you more about the benefits that we're seeing. This is actually an analysis of 5 customer interviews, helping to look across a number of different facets within the environment, not simply just the lift and shift. There are other customers in these interviews that are using OpenShift and Kubernetes, and they're getting additional benefits around developer productivity and operational efficiencies. And then they specifically go into detail on the data center cost savings, which is on average of 40%. So some great assets here. I do encourage everyone to take a look. Please look at our 2020 Total Economic Impact Study with Forrester, and then take a look at the 2019 one as well. I think there's a lot of good data points and comparisons. And then for customers and partners that are interested, we can work with you and Akaja Cloud to actually help to analyze those environments and quantify some of the benefits that you may see by moving on to IBM Cloud for VMware. Now, we can't do it alone. We've got many different IBM services teams and partners that are leveraging these capabilities to their benefit. And really, it's the partners and the service teams that make this all happen. We've got a number of service teams that can help our customers and our partners immediately. And we'll have an excellent call to action offer here at the end that will really help to highlight that and how DNA IT is going to be able to help you and their customers take advantage of this very simply for no cost. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit. So what I'd like to get into now is really the first case of migrate and modernize. To be able to modernize those environments, first, you really have to make sure that it's operating on a secure and supported platform. Once that's been satisfied, you're able to go into a multitude of different directions. Modernize, in some cases, does have a connotation of containerization. So what I'd like to just help to kind of clarify is modernize can mean many things in the context of a VMware environment. There are a number of virtual machines that are operating in that environment to satisfy a number of needs in environments today, but where they go next can be really impactful. How they're backed up, what is the DR strategy? You know, should there be an event, a security event, and you need to recover, you need to have confidence that what you're recovering has not been infected. These are things that are big challenges on premise today because of maybe lack of data storage and other things. Companies have made certain compromises that may not necessarily be best fitting for the protection of that environment. And now you're able to very simply modernize that by taking advantage of these new cloud capabilities. But also by deploying regulated workloads in FS Cloud, you're able to modernize the security and regulatory components, and then also very simply able to transform them into things around containerization, OpenShift, and many other use cases as well. I should also say desktop as a service is a great place to modernize these environments. Within a VMware environment, you will often see that there are a lot of virtual machines that are facilitating a number of different use cases. By bringing them into cloud, it doesn't really make sense to continue to just run virtual machines to act as a storage gateway, for instance, or to run virtual machines to act as a desktop, which we see a lot. Working with Akaja, now over 200 projects complete, we've seen Windows 7 in probably more than half of those environments. And we've seen Windows 2008, which is not in support and not available on any other clouds, in I'd say 90% of those environments. These are excellent candidates to be modernized, and to be modernized not only from updating the operating system if you're talking about Windows 2008, but things that are desktop and other pieces like that really should start to be modernized onto services that are ideal for those types of virtual machines and use cases. In cloud really makes it very simple to adopt those technologies. Some of the challenges that our customers are coming up with when adopting Kubernetes and containers is security. Where it's deployed, how does that container have access to other components of the environment? Are you inadvertently bringing new security challenges by adopting containers? Not all customers and partners have fully gone down that path, and these are some real challenges. By being able to deploy your Kubernetes or OpenShift environment directly on top of your VMware landscape, the same security practices that you have for your virtual machines can also apply for your containers and can go much further with even more exacting control when using NSXT. So the concerns about security can really just melt right away when you're building a consistent, cohesive solution on top of that VMware landscape, making it very simple to adopt these solutions and giving customers and partners the confidence that they're not inadvertently introducing new risk or complexities that they may not fully understand or be able to control once it's out and deployed. To tell you a little bit more about, what does that look like for OpenShift and how does this all come together? OpenShift effectively is very popular on top of VMware. It's deployed in many customer environments on-premise today and on cloud, and you're simply able to deploy that directly into that existing VMware environment. So no matter what storage that you've chosen, it essentially just sits on top of that environment, and the provisioning of the virtual machines, the orchestration alongside VMware, and being able to scale up or burst is all actually handled through automation within OpenShift and the VMware vSphere to enable that by providing the operator within OpenShift the resource that it needs to be able to provision, configure, scale, and destroy. It has tight integrations with that VMware environment to do all of that within the resource that's available. All standardized within that environment, and then giving you exacting control over the infrastructure and the networking, all within that landscape. Now, why are customers deploying OpenShift onto VMware? It really helps to maintain the operational consistency. OpenShift itself is a very popular platform for containerization and orchestration of those environments. This hybrid cloud approach is really resonating for customers that are on-premise, on cloud, on edge, and how do they do that consistently and securely? Well, VMware and OpenShift is becoming really a 1-2 punch of how customers are starting to take these capabilities and have a consistent approach to their infrastructure automation and their platform automation with OpenShift and VMware. I'd like to tell you a story about a customer we worked with, American Airlines, who's really adopted these technologies to great success. We worked with American Airlines to help take a heritage application that was running their kiosk booking and rapidly lift and shift that onto IBM Cloud for VMware. Because it was already running VMware today, being able to simply move it on to IBM Cloud for VMware was very simple, simply leveraging techniques through VMware HCX to extend their existing networks in a hybrid solution and provide connectivity to existing on-prem applications alongside what was operating on the cloud. And then within that environment, they were able to rapidly, actually in combination of modernizing the infrastructure and the application, fully adopt Kubernetes for that booking application. Because they had this full access and they were able to deploy alongside existing applications, they were able to fully re-platform this application in a very, very rapid time frame. Something that we're seeing some customers who had more of an approach of they would refactor, re-platform, or redevelop before adopting cloud usually leads to more challenges, hurdles, and risks. The solution that was employed here of simply lifting and shifting and then having that hybrid connectivity to existing premise applications gave them the connectivity and the confidence to rapidly innovate the environment at a much faster clip than would have been possible should they try to refactor first. What I'm seeing a lot is, the promise of cloud brings many capabilities to our customers and partners, but sometimes they don't necessarily have the full mind model of how they're going to get to that promise. We saw a lot of customers simply just try to rip and replace, trying to do everything cloud native right off the bat, and that has not really resulted in success for many of those customers. For the customers that are really looking at this approach of being able to lift and shift that landscape and then modernize and get maximum ROI out of the components that make the most sense to replatform, refactor, and redevelop, that's where those customers are having the most success, and this is a great success story of that. This is just some summary details of like what really made an impact. Being that we're a top leader for VMware and Red Hat, bringing these premier solutions really drove the rapid innovation of that environment on top of these innovative solutions. NSXT is able to provide that consistent network and security policy across not only your VMware environment and your containers, but I should also add that NSXT has been fully abstracted from VMware. NSXT itself can run fully isolated. It is a firewall, gateway, and VPN appliance. There's no requirement to run it on VMware. It doesn't even require the VMware hypervisor anymore. It can be deployed directly onto bare metal. And what that means is your existing x86 or perhaps Power or other workloads that are not inside of a VMware envelope can actually benefit from NSXT, being able to deploy this in any of the scenarios of public, private, edge, or premise, and having a cohesive network envelope that benefits all of them. This is making it very simple to have a very cohesive solution across a multitude of different environments. Now, I think we're getting a little close here to our time, so I do want to advance a little bit. I think we've got maybe another 5 minutes here. So I'm going to jump a little bit forward into our regulated workloads and talk more about what this means. Earlier, I was helping to highlight this slide of the IBM Cloud for VMware regulated workloads in FS Cloud and talk about how all of these technologies come together in a cohesive solution, building into a reference design, giving our customers and partners the ability to actually observe and react to their compliance in real time and be able to provide compliance reports on demand. This solution is really a number of different components, and this is helping to kind of illustrate that. Within the IBM Cloud for VMware regulated workload design, there are 3 main components that facilitate the workload. It's a edge cluster, which is handling your networking, the ability for VPN, firewalling, and isolation from public internet. You have the unique option on IBM Cloud for VMware to deploy solutions with public connectivity or no public connectivity. We have many customers that are in the regulated workspaces who do not operate any public edges within IBM Cloud. They have explicitly actually turned that off by disabling those network interfaces and additional firewall configurations, and they're exclusively consuming this through private connectivity, which we call direct link. That's an option for customers that have those very high exacting security controls. They're able to leverage that and then pipe it through their existing infrastructure for how they may be routing through public networks if they choose to do so, and then providing that solution to their existing networks through those private connections. Additionally, the management cluster is isolated from the workload components. This gives the ability to set up exacting controls over role-based access, isolating your management from your network edges and from your workload edges to give you additional security postures and control over affinity, anti-affinity, and what's operating in those environments. And then being able to abstract who has access to what components of the environment, ensuring that different roles, responsibilities, and controls are given to the right individuals based on their need to access. And then things like encryption and backing up are all able to be controlled within that management environment. The workload clusters themselves are separate from these other two pieces, and you have the option of deploying workload clusters individually. So many customers will deploy a workload cluster specific for the databases, and they'll optimize that infrastructure for that use case. What we often see in that exercise is an optimization of licensing, reducing the number of cores or CPUs to minimize licensing impact for some database solutions, but also being able to do that for anti-affinity or affinity and performance reasons as well, and then being able to maximize those different workload clusters and shapes based on their use for that environment. All of these things are very simple and easy to understand within the portal and the API, and these are just some simple little network abstractions that make it easy to adopt and be able to disaggregate your solution and have it secured based on those roles and responsibilities. There are some minimum requirements to deploy this solution because of the unique requirements to ensure that you have the separation of those roles and those workload types. There are some minimum requirements on the number of nodes that are necessary. This is simply where you would start. If you're looking to also deploy and have data replicated across 2 sites simultaneously, you will need additional nodes for that vSAN solution. And in the middle here, for the full suite in a single zone region, you'll see that they can start out at 10 hosts, but if you wanted to go into the full multi-zone solution, there's a minimum of 21 hosts. That may be quite sizable for some solutions, but for customers that have very high SLA requirements and very high security requirements, these types of solutions can be deployed very simply, things that would take weeks or months to really configure. 21 hosts configured in a vSphere cluster would take a number of hours to actually configure, all available really within probably a day's time to have this full solution up and running, and then a number of different ways to get started. So for as little as 5 nodes up to 21, customers have a number of different solutions within the regulated workload to give them the highest level of security and uptime, depending on what their requirements may be. Jumping a little bit ahead, I'd like to talk about desktops as a service. Earlier, we were talking about the modernization of VMware environments. In those environments, working with Akash and Forrester, we have observed that there are lots of desktops that are running in those environments too. I would really encourage customers to look at making those desktops a desktop as a service. Because of the use of a desktop, there are different requirements that often go alongside instead of just a base VMware environment. New use cases for GPUs, perhaps it's an engineering firm and they're doing seismic analysis or they're doing modeling. Those GPUs are needed for those types of workloads, and you wouldn't necessarily have a GPU running a database. So desktop as a service is a good scenario where you can optimize the hardware along with the use case and be able to do this on an individual basis. With the desktop solutions that we offer on IBM Cloud, there's a lot of different flexibility, but also it makes it very simple to essentially abstract that function into a service. Additional controls around security and access and enabling customers and partners to bring their own devices, and the way that things had shifted over the last couple of years and work from home, there is a big need to run desktop as a service, and these solutions are really growing at a very rapid clip on our solution. Gartner had a stat here that the growth of desktop as a service will be growing over 253% between 2021 and 2024. And we have definitely been observing this in a multitude of different scenarios. Desktop as a service, I would say, has been the most popular, but also VDI, or virtual desktop infrastructure, things like VMware Horizon or Citrix desktops are very popular, but many, many more customers or partners do seem to prefer the as a service model, so they don't necessarily have all of that additional infrastructure that has to be managed in the services and the software on top of it, and they can simply consume what they need when they need it. There are some very common use cases around hybrid workers, especially working remote over the last couple of years, and many customers continuing in that for their employees. It's becoming more and more common, and I think people really like the flexibility of their schedule and being able to work where they want to work, when they want to work, and having access to the right systems and tools when they need them. Also, for contract employees, giving them their own device or having dedicated infrastructure can be very costly. By having the control of the desktop and being able to provide access and track that access is very important when working with different contract employees to ensure that the security and processes are met. And for processes, compliances are really what drives that, ensuring that people only have access to the things that they need access to. They're not keeping data on their local systems or extracting that data onto their local systems. All of those compliances can be adhered to in these desktop as a service type of solutions, making it simple for customers and partners to make it easy to adhere to these compliances. One thing that's also been very interesting as well is developers. We're seeing that developer desktops is actually one of the more common scenarios that's coming up. Providing the code repository and the code tools and then all of the right networking access that's necessary is very cost effective for developers to immediately hit the ground running. I myself used to be a developer in the past, and getting my IDE or independent development environment up and running would normally take about 2 to 3 weeks, depending on the developer's experience of the environment, making sure all of the right packages are configured and installed so you can actually build the code set. Now, desktop as a service can make it very simple to create a gold image of all of those components and then have them immediately available for those developers. And then additionally, the benefits of data control and compliance and being able to bring your own device really pays dividends for our customers and partners that are adopting these solutions. With the optimization of being able to make it easy for our developers to take advantage of these solutions across a number of different environments, it could be Windows, could be Linux. There's a very wide set of operating systems that are supported on VMware. This very large selection makes it easy to meet your development and solution teams where they are and where they may be going. Being able to quickly getting them access to the environment is going to increase productivity. They've got a number of different flexible ways to adopt those operating systems. And then more specifically, compliances around HIPAA, PCI, and GDPR are very important for these types of solutions. And for our desktop as a solution, which is Dision, it is built for customers that have these strict compliances to adhere to. Dision on IBM Cloud is a desktop as a service running on top of the VMware infrastructure and IBM Cloud. It's a turnkey solution where very simply you're able to get it up and running very quickly simply by just the number of concurrent desktops that are needed. There's no need to completely deploy a VMware environment and install all of the necessary pieces that are needed to get it up and running. This is all available for customers at the click of a button, and then they can simply scale up and scale down the number of users based on the licenses that go with it. The solution was built from day one to be designed for customers that have compliance requirements, and even for customers that may have needs for fully dedicated solutions, we also offer that as well. We launched this solution with Dision just almost 2 years ago, and it's been very rapidly growing. It's now available in 8 different IBM Cloud data centers, and we have now deployed over 20 customers onto the solution with over 44,000 users leveraging it today. A great win story. We can't share the customer name at this moment, but this is a very large North American bank. They had been running a sizable number of desktops and were looking at IBM Cloud as a location to run 4,300 secure desktops. The primary use case here is for developers and contractors, also the call center solutions as well. And there was a very extensive review of the solutions, and ultimately this customer chose IBM Dision Desktop to run those solutions. You know, I don't think it requires much more explanation, but banks and financial institutions have some of the highest regulations and compliances out there in the cloud, and Dision turned out to be the best solution in the market and is now deployed over 4,300 desktops onto that solution in just a one-year horizon. It's very likely this will continue to grow, but you can understand that this type of environment well suited for customers that have these compliances and are able to satisfy them and able to do so very cost effectively. So this is actually where I hand off to Adrian. I'd like to pass the baton back to Adrian, if you will, see if we have any questions.
We do have a couple of good questions we might just look at. The people have asked us, one of them being, does it matter if I'm on an earlier version of VMware, or is there a limit to what type of VMware we're on?
Yeah, for the version of VMware, the VMware solutions on IBM Cloud now have standardized on vSphere 7. We do have many customers that are still on the process of moving to vSphere 8, but if you're running vSphere 6, or even if you're running vSphere 5, those environments are supported on IBM Cloud when you move into vSphere 7. So even for customers that are very behind the curve going back to 5, tools like HCX can actually automate the migration of those environments going back to vSphere 5.1. So even if you haven't been able to keep up with the updates and the security requirements, and you might be running a bit behind the curve, there are a number of solutions on IBM Cloud that can support even going back to 5 or 5.1. And then in addition to that, we do offer just bare metal nodes that are VMware verified. And if a customer wanted to install an older version because that was their preference, they would still have that full capability to do so as well.
Very good. And another one here, just I think these two are kind of related in a way for yourself, or maybe Noel to comment on. You touched on some of this in your presentation. I suppose it's the whole issue of cost and the egress fees, particularly that some people have found, particularly with production systems in the cloud, unanticipated fees really around the networking data egress, particularly. What's IBM's position in that, or the whole story around the network? You mentioned a lot lower cost base. Can you just elaborate on that a tiny bit, either yourself or Noel, on how that model works within IBM?
Yeah, it's quite simple actually. All of our VMware solutions on IBM Cloud provide that capability of free private network traffic. Any east to west traffic or even southbound traffic that can traverse multiple data centers, all of the IBM Cloud for VMware solutions are connected by default by the IBM private cloud backbone. You can see what your utilization is, but the cost of it is zero. So simply by deploying into 2 different data centers or regions on IBM Cloud for VMware, by default, that customer account will have that capability. They will be able to route between both of those environments. They can see their utilization and there will be no cost to use it. And then additionally, they have full control over additional network capabilities to add VPN and additional network encryption and control and shaping of that traffic at their own discretion. So it's there once you simply deploy into 2 different locations and start to move data between those 2 endpoints.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to that, Adrian, if I could.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, you know, on that particular point, and you and I know from working together in the Irish market for the last few years, I haven't seen one customer with a networking bill, which is great. And really, what that does, just to follow on from what JD said, is it ensures that customers can have a predictable set of bills each month. And I think IBM really is the only cloud that can do that. You know, you see what you're using, and that's what you pay for. there's no variable networking bill. So you don't get a nasty surprise each month when your bill arrives in for a variable item. The only variance will be if you increase your workload consumption. So that's, you know, I think that's a really important point.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess the next piece, there's been one other comment just made on it, and again, it's probably, this is for DNA not unusual, because we tend to find when people have not yet committed to the cloud in any meaningful way, it's a valid question when people are concerned still about latency. Where's the data center? Where's the nearest data center? What about latency in the Irish context? Either of you want to take, I mean, I could answer that myself as our own experience, but just regard to the underlying network underneath it, either of you want to take a comment on that?
Sure. Within the European market, there are a bunch of great locations to choose from. We have an MZR in London, a multi-zone region, over 3 data centers deployed in that London site. We also have presence in Frankfurt, Amsterdam, Milan, and Paris. So lots of different European locations to choose from. You're able to ping across those sites and see what the latency is. It's very performant within those regions. And then within latency, there's also concerns locally. We have a lot of customers that are interestingly running VoIP solution and call centers on top of IBM Cloud for VMware. And latency is a paramount detail that is a key indicator of the performance and quality of those solutions. By having access to this private backbone, you're able to move data and communications very effectively with very low latency across those locations. And then also the added benefit of VMware and IBM Cloud and having that full control over that environment is you'll have the most control over how you place your virtual machines and containers if containers are part of that solution. Minimizing hops is always going to reduce latency. By minimizing the number of things that those packets need to traverse will always reduce latency. And you're able to really optimize affinity and anti-affinity in those environments on IBM Cloud for VMware. So a multitude of different solutions that can help on optimizing those performance for your network, and then a very wide selection of locations to deploy these VMware solutions to in the European and other markets.
Excellent. Okay, very good. That's all the questions. And speaking of latency, I in my presentation earlier on. Apologies for that. Wasn't aware of it. It's within the webinar platform itself. So just finally then, I guess we'll finish up there, guys. Thanks a million for your contribution. Do you want to just put up the thing about the offer of the POC there, JD?
Yeah, where I'd like to just leave off is, you know, hopefully you've seen all of the great solutions that we've got and how DNA IT can help you. Reach out through Adrian and DNA to actually take advantage of this very, very, I think, generous free POC. It's a full production grade POC environment. It's dedicated to an individual customer. And this is something that you'll be able to uniquely take advantage of exclusively through DNA IT. So thank you so much for the time, Adrian, and everyone. Really appreciate this. This was a fantastic opportunity, and I really look forward to working with everyone, and hopefully we can get started on a POC soon.
That would be brilliant, absolutely, and thanks very much for that. It is something that I guess we are delighted to be able to offer people who are taking their first steps into the cloud, and quite rightly have concern. They've never done this before. They want to make sure great offer to encourage everyone to do that. So guys, thanks very much for your time. We'll leave it at that, and thanks very much for that. It was brilliant. Bye bye.